So we're just going to smile for the camera.
Jeez.
Okay, now let's do one where we're like this, like. Oh, let me do it back here. Okay, great. So that's the beginning, and now we're going to get to the real shit of it. Are you ready to like heart on the table? Changing lives. Are we ready?
Ready.
Okay. So, welcome to What You're Craving. I'm Molly Carmel, and I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Shun Foreman, RN, and so many other things. But Shun has been a registered nurse for 21 years, and she's amazing, and you get to learn that today. But to enhance the knowledge of the world around her, she completed a degree in human rights and social justice at Southern Methodist University. These graduate studies allowed her to travel to learn more about Sugarland 95 and to tour sugar plantations, which we're going to talk a lot about today. She believes the combined experience of nursing and human rights and social justice allows her to use a unique lens on how sugar has impacted African American communities since slavery. She believes wholeheartedly that food sources, African American women, and the hidden harm of sugar are the three most overlooked sources of healing African American communities. Therefore, her life's work is centered around sugar awareness and creating dialogue change that will empower and promote healing in communities of color. You are a goddess also. For far too long, vulnerable communities have been stigmatized, and Shun believes that bringing sugar awareness to communities of color is a way to heal all of our communities as a whole. I am not going to use this word lightly. I am so honored to have you here. I'm so honored to talk about who you are and what you're all about. I know you. This is not our first meeting.
Right.
I'm really excited for everyone else to know you for a lot of reasons. A, the work you're doing is incredible and it's heart opening and it's inspiring. And so are you. So let's get to it. What
Thank
led
you.
you to this work? Tell us the story.
Wow. So I can't help but to go back to my childhood and having a mom who was, if I think about it, at that time, she really was just like a community health worker, if I had to put a title on it now. Um, so on the weekends, it's like we would always go to like a nursing home or a funeral home or a funeral, or we would help elderly people in their homes. And I didn't realize at that time that she was actually teaching me how to care for people.
Mm, that's beautiful.
So I picked up on that and just really learning like the nonverbal skills of taking care of people. When they're grunting, that means something. When they're trying to move, that means something. And so I learned some of those skills from her.
Mm.
But one of the things that I really think when I look back on like, who am I and where did I come from? I used to love teaching my dolls in my bedroom. I love teaching my dolls. And I had two older brothers and no sisters. So I've just always been kind of like that loner kid. But at the same time, I always knew how to keep myself entertained.
Yeah.
Um, I learned that I really was so passionate about teaching my dolls or my kids in my classroom that I would literally make tests for them, and I'd grade the tests. I'd hand the test back, and if they needed tutorial or anything, I would stay after class and tutor them one on one. In my mind, um,
So
seems like that worked.
helping people is like since day one, wanting
Yeah,
to
I
help
feel
people,
like
feeling that calling.
yeah, if it wasn't, my dolls, it was like animals in the neighborhood.
Mm.
So and the weird thing is I remember the day when my doll, in my mind, my doll became sick, and I literally used just what I'd seen the nurses do in the hospital. I literally took a needle and a thread and I used a Ziploc bag and I filled it with water. I hung that up on the post,
Hmm.
and then I used the needle and thread as an IV for my baby doll.
Huh.
So, to me, I just like to emphasize how, like, I just believe at my core, I'm going to care for people.
Yeah. We're
I'm
lucky to
also
have you.
for people who just cannot help themselves. I mean, I think my mom taught me how to do that. But going a little bit deeper into like how I ended up in the sugar world, because I really do feel like it's a default for me. Um, Although I had the nursing background, I didn't really have that much of an interest in sugar because honestly, for me, the more money I made, the more things I could have. And sugar happened to be one of those things I could just have more control over, right? I could just eat as much as I wanted to. But I do recall sitting in the lobby one day with a bunch of my aunts and uncles, and we were just kind of talking about our general health. And it just a question kind of came to me and just said, "Hey, how many of you have diabetes?" And all of, I think half of them raised their hand. How many of you
Wow.
have hypertension? And all of them raised their hands. But the point being is that most of them have one or the other or all, and we don't even talk about obesity in our
Right.
community, because that's just like a trigger word for a lot of people.
What do you mean?
So
How is it a trigger word?
I think it's because you might hear that people will say things like, "I'm big bone just like my mom,"
Hmm. Hmm.
you know um but that dismisses the fact that there is a clinical indicator for
Right.
obesity or overweight or over
Hmm.
your ideal weight.
Of
So
course.
it dismisses what medicine or the science is, but a lot of times we just won't look at the word obesity.
Right.
So
That it almost
you know
shuts down any action. Like
yeah,
you say the word
yeah,
obesity and it's like, I'm gonna go eat more sugar now.
that's exactly right.
Right.
So the one thing that I found interesting about that conversation, and that just kind of like stayed with me, like it just stuck with me. My uncle like turned the question on me, and he was like, "What about you?" Well, at that time, I was riding around 200 pounds, with my short stature, and I thought I was doing pretty good to cover up a little fat. I really did. I was just like, but my answer to him was, he said, "Do you have diabetes or hypertension?" And I said, "No, not yet." And it was so like,
Wow.
no, not yet. That stuck with me for so long. And uh it was like a thing that I just couldn't get off of my mind. And like,
Hmm.
why would I say no, not yet? And I'm a nurse and I know
Yeah.
hypertension, diabetes, all these things are preventative diseases,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So at that time I was in school, and we actually were in Sugarland, Texas to drop off one of my daughters for a summer camp. And they were in the middle of exhuming the bodies of 95, then what they would call a convict leasing system, or they were enslaved to work in the prison system.
Wow.
So a school system was trying to build and expand, and they came across these bodies. And
Wow.
so the story was kind of like, I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy, that, and for me, it's just kind of like sad because I'm like, wait a minute, 95 bodies. And then you can't help but to think from what time period,
Yeah.
you know? And so that, and it almost seemed like, Molly, like the sugar universe just opened up to me. Like at that time, my favorite show is still today is Queen Sugar. And we were looking
That's a really good
at
show, by the way.
I love it. I love it. I truly love it. But it's just, like Black land ownership and land loss. And how difficult it is to farm as a Black farmer.
Mhm.
So I would, in my mind, I kept thinking about like sugar just keeps coming to me. It keeps coming to me.
Yeah. I call it a
I knew
download. It's like you just got tapped. Like you got tapped
yeah.
by the universe, like things about to change. And boy, did they change,
Mhm.
by the way. Yeah.
So, and I was in graduate school, needed to complete a thesis. And of course, I was going to do a thesis on, I'm a nurse. How do I make this nursing world interact with this human rights world, and it was sort of easy to go to like diabetes, right?
Right.
And then I just said, that's not like everybody's writing about diabetes and African Americans. I can't do like, and that would not do, I don't know what body, like what that would do to help the body of work of diabetes because there's already so much out there. There's already so much
Yeah, it's the
information
easy
about
way,
it,
right? That was the easy thing to do to complete the degree, like write what everyone else is writing, not you.
right? And so I asked my professor, Dr. Bledsoe, if I could just, hey, what do you think about this whole sugar topic? And she was just like, well, I mean, you're gonna have to dig a little deeper, because I was kind of stuck with this whole Sugar Land 95 and that wasn't enough. But then I came across a book called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And the way that she wrote the book, she's a licensed social worker, but the way she wrote the book, it made me want to go back all the way to slavery and say, what's our connection as African Americans? What's our connection with sugar? And so, because I'm such a touchy feely, I've got to go and learn things. I needed to go back to Sugar Land and talk to the person who was in the media at the time. I sought him out and I was just like, look, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm trying to complete a degree and I really want to know more about the Sugar Land 95. We walked through the grave sides and he
Can
took
you just
me.
really, like, in a Reader's Digest moment, tell us, what Sugarland 95 is, just for those of us who don't know about it?
Yeah, it's basically the time period after Reconstruction. Um, we'll say that American farm owners they had a dilemma on their hands. You've
Yeah.
got a whole bunch of free Black people walking around who once worked the land for free.
Mm,
So the dilemma was, what do we do to basically get our workers back?
mm,
And so they developed like these prison systems, which they now called convict leasing systems, to where you basically could lock up Black bodies and make them still do the work for free.
wow.
So, and so that's what Sugarland 95 is about for me, because there's so much history. And then just seeing that there's a, there's, there was a prison system there. There was the Imperial Sugar plant there, you
Mhm.
know. And now if you go there, you really don't see any of that history.
Wow.
You really don't see it. So it amazes me sometimes that we can walk around history and not know what was really there. And that place reminds me of it. And the name itself
Yeah.
reminds me of, Sugarland. So, saddening, and but yet one of those things for me, like when I have an experience, I always try to think like, how can I take this horrible information and use it for the greater good?
Yeah.
And because yeah, I could walk away upset, but being upset wasn't going to do anything,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's not a
So
business plan, right?
right, yeah. So I used part of that research and that visit with, his name is Reginald Moore, and just used it for just thinking a little bit more about sugar. And he was intrigued when I told him, I said, this is an industry that's still hurting us. And he just looked at me like, I've never thought about it like that.
Mm.
Never. He said, I never have thought about it like that. And because I was so worried about trying to tie it into the healthcare, like,
Right.
what about our health,
Yeah.
So also, just like I said, I'm touchy feely. I've got to go see history if I can.
Right.
And so, of course, I wanted to do the sugar plantations down in Louisiana.
Hmm.
Um, I I still have some what I call internal tears
Of course.
um,
Of course.
about visiting the plantation.
Yeah.
But those internal tears are actually what they drive me to work and to say, you know what? Whatever information I get my hands on, I need to share it so that people can survive, so that they can live longer, extend their lives. Because what I did find out with the research is, you know, when a um, when a when a slave was admitted to a sugar colony, they had a lifespan of about 5 to 7 years, and that was
Wow.
it. So if
Wow.
you put a 14-year-old boy into sugar farming, then he's probably gone by 19.
That's
So
heartbreaking.
it makes me think about the value of a Black body, and also the value of who places that value on Black bodies, you know? And so, but all of that moving forward to today, I'm still like, wow, if we are over consuming sugar, then we're still feeding this large beast without understanding how harmful it is and has been, you know. So that's really how I got here.
Yeah.
It's just kind of by way of, I like to say, default, because I mean, when I started the thesis, I was 50 pounds up from what I'm up now, what I am now.
Yeah. So then what happened? So then you're writing this thesis and recognizing things. I mean, I think there's two beautiful things that happen here in my understanding of the story, which is you start to understand these things about yourself, which I think is how it happens because we can't give what we don't have. And then I really want to hear and then you decide you have to take it large, which you're doing right
Yeah.
now, which I want everyone to hear about. But so what happens within you after when you're writing this
Uh,
thesis?
I was at points, I was so overwhelmed with information that I literally wanted to quit. Like the paper was all over the place
Because it was
because my thought,
painful or because it like what why did you want to quit?
it was painful, but I also really had made the connection that, I'm still doing this thing to myself,
Oh,
you know, I'm
yeah.
still doing this thing. Um,
Yeah, so, like, you were harming yourself while writing this paper about intergenerational trauma of harm to yourself.
right.
I relate to that very deeply in my own life. I really yeah,
Mhm.
I get that.
Yeah, I was still drinking the Dr. Peppers and, and eating the donuts in the morning, so I was still feeding this beast until the point where I got to a little bit more on the health side of it. And I said, wait a minute. Wait, you mean to tell me it's connected to high blood pressure,
Mm,
me being overweight, my potential for having diabetes, and also cholesterol? So when I started to see it, I was like, okay, that's out of my house. I'm done with sugar altogether.
yep.
So that's kind of the process that happened to me. So I'd like to say I sort of, out of spite, was just like, I'm rejecting sugar,
Takes what it takes. Great job.
Yeah,
I'll
right.
show you. There you go.
Right.
Take your
Yeah.
power back. I love it.
So, and then after graduating, I was just like, I'm not done. I need more training about sugar. And then kind of running across these articles about addiction. And I'm like, is
Mm,
this really true? Like,
yeah.
really? I mean, and then I had to face the news for myself. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good chick,
I
So,
get yeah, yeah. You're like a nurse addicted to sugar. I get it, right? I was like this therapist, like complete eating disorders therapist, like binging my
yes,
brains out. Like it's a
it was crazy.
it's pretty crazy,
So,
isn't it? It's like
so
it's a
but
pretty
then
crazy
to
life.
acknowledge that, and just say, oh, okay, yeah, this is a thing and it's bigger than I am. But how do I use the health part, connect the history part, and make it a real thing? You
Yeah.
know, then I said, you know what, if I'm struggling with not knowing this information, and I've been a nurse for 20 years, I know some other people are struggling with the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where the work is coming from.
Well, you're talking so much about intergenerational trauma, which is, I think, so overlooked in so many areas, especially the one we're talking about here. And you talk about how these issues in your community stem back to slavery. How do you feel like this connects back to the food issues in your community?
I hear the terms food insecurity, and I have to watch, like what I think about those terms. But
Mhm.
when we think about, for me, food being a part of a secure part of livelihood,
Mm,
then I get it.
right.
You know, then what do we use it to celebrate? Do we use it to fellowship? Do we use it to comfort? Then
Mhm,
yes. Is it a go-to thing? Yes.
mm,
And so, I kind of I look at terms like that and I think, I think the experience of an African American is that you're constantly trying to figure out a way not to become a statistic.
wow.
You I mean, for me, I don't I don't want my husband to die
Right.
because he's coming home from work. So there are certain checkpoints that we've got, like, babe, you got to check in with me, you
Yeah.
know, when we look at education, there are certain cracks that we can fall through with education. And then the same thing when we look at we're a minority group, but we're a majority when we're represented for healthcare problems.
Mm, wow. That's a
That
really beautiful
to
way
me,
to say it. An
so
unfortunate way, but a beautiful way to say it. Yeah.
so to me, it's just trying to work with these terms, like terms like food deserts. I'm like, yeah, I like to add to that. That these it's really like fuel deserts. That's
Wow.
what we have.
Yeah.
I mean, because we have food, if
Right.
you're gonna call it food, but is it good food or is it fuel? No,
Right.
you know.
No, it's
So
like
and
poison. Right.
yeah, we learn the difference between a fuel, something that's truly gonna give us what we need to give us the energy and the stamina to go through the day
Mhm.
versus something that's going to get into our bodies, disrupt our thinking patterns, disrupt our energy levels. You know,
Yeah. So, okay. So you get tapped, right? You get tapped by the universe like, "Hey, Nurse Shun, there's a new sheriff in town. Sugar mode off." That's our t-shirts say that. Our sugar
mhm,
it's like this is like Shun's jam. Sugar mode off. Woohoo! I'm there. I'm there. You know? So you get tapped and then what happens? Like tell us about the change that you've started to create within this world and how you got there. Like where did you start?
starting for me is it's such a like ugh, it's such a burden because I like my happy life.
Right.
I like to just work my job and come home and see the kids and play with my dogs. But the reality is that people need this information.
Right.
So to me, the work starts with just saying, what happened to me? Okay, I'm a mom. I typically bought the groceries. I made the decisions for what we were going to eat for the night.
Mhm.
I was struggling with my weight and my health. So that's where the work starts.
Mhm.
The work starts with the African American woman or the woman of color because she's the one that's out there going to buy those groceries and going to buy that, the three, I don't even know what they are now, 3 cases of soda because they're on sale and they're probably cheaper than water.
I love this thing you're saying, because it's like, it's not always like the best news in the world when you get inspired and you get tapped, right? You're like, I'm not sure I want to be starting this movement in my community. I might just want to play fetch with my dog.
It's so true.
So get
That
that.
is good.
So so
That
get
is
that.
good. And but you know,
But would
when
you say like because I really want to hear about the work you're doing, and I remember us talking about this other group that you were in with women sharing their stories, and it
mm,
sounds like that was a really impactful part of how you kind of because I think what ends up happening is like you get tapped, you have a knowing that something should be different. You might want to be a different person. You may want to help promote some change. But then I don't know, in my experience, like, okay, like now what? How do I
yeah,
do it? What do I do? And so can you talk a little bit about that group and what
yeah.
that did for you?
Yeah, so that group is called the Collective, and it was just so I didn't even realize what it was about when I was like, I knew there were gonna be women sharing their stories.
It was just a bunch of
So,
women of your in your community share. I
yeah,
mean, I
well, it
I would
was
love to do that. That's
it
all I
was
ever want to do, by the way, is sit and
well, you're
tell
doing it.
stories. I know it's so fun. I'm so
Yeah.
lucky.
So one of my professors, Dr. Candace Bledsoe, she started this whole idea of, that women of color should share their narratives.
Oh,
And by telling their stories, that we would become inspired and empowered. And so I started going to these meetings, and I thought like the first one was really good. I was like, this is good. I got something out of it.
what was it about? Like in general
Well,
terms.
these are women who have achieved great things in their profession.
Mhm.
Like for example, the dean of the law school,
Whoa,
a
yeah.
practice woman. But then when you learn that, oh my God, their journeys come with so much failure. It's like,
Yeah, believe
you
it.
mean to tell me you didn't quit?
Right, believe it,
And
yeah.
or either that, oh my God, you had an issue with the substance and you didn't let that stop you from being who you are today. And
Wow.
I was so if you hear enough of those stories, you then it's kind of almost like the light begins to shine on you and say, okay, it's your turn. And
Wow.
that's exactly what she did, Dr. Bledsoe. After about 3 years of me sitting there and listening and being, a great student,
Right,
she was like,
taking your notes, getting ready for your PowerPoint,
"Yeah."
just being
And I
quiet.
could
Mhm.
see she had seen the transformation, of my
Your
body and my
physical
mind.
trans so in the
Right.
midst of while you're in the collective, you've broken up with sugar, and
Yes.
you're doing this thesis, and you're understanding the intergenerational trauma and what sugar has to do with that your community, and you're sitting and you're listening to all of this truth telling.
Right. And then she goes, okay,
This is a
it's time for
movie.
you to, she's like, it's time for you to tell your story. And I was like, I don't have a story, you know, I'm just, I'm just a nurse,
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
just a
Yeah.
mom,
That
you know,
that imposter syndrome is something else, isn't it?
yeah, it
I
is.
gotta tell you, because you are so far. I mean, I'm sure you're a wonderful nurse, but as your friend, I can say
Thank you.
that is not even remotely a word. A nurse would not be the way I would describe you.
Mhm.
Maybe
Well,
goddess, but
yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
it's
So,
true.
and being in that setting, sort of connecting that world to the experience of sitting in church as a child and not understanding why people would stand up their freaking story in church, like the testimonial part. I
Yeah.
never understood that. But then it dawned on me, especially as I've gotten older, I was like, oh my God, the person that's getting up and telling their story first of all, is vulnerable as I'm not going to say the word, but I could
You
use
know
a
it.
curse word, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Okay. But they're in the process of healing. Not only are
Sure.
they healing, but somebody that's listening to them is also in the process of healing.
Hmm.
And then it dawned on me that, like, okay, you really care about people, right? If you really care, then you got to get out there. You got to tell them. Because I'd seen it work for myself and my husband. My husband is down 80, 81 pounds.
Good for him. Was
Yeah.
your sense that if you introduced this idea to your community, it wouldn't be well received?
No,
Why not?
I, I, I think, you know, I'm gonna tell you that. Okay, we're sisters.
Yeah.
You don't mess with a black
Give me the
woman's
dirty truth, girl.
money.
That's all I
You
want.
don't you don't mess with a black woman's money, man, food, or her kids.
Get it.
So you don't
Get it.
tell her. You don't tell me what to cook for my kids.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a barrier. That's a good one. Yeah,
So,
I'll take it.
so
So you were
you
like really going into some like uh yes, you were going some tricky territory, we could say some eggshells to say the least.
very, 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 very. And I still have, it's still an issue, like because I realized after I sort of went out on this, gung ho sugar mission, my first approach was doing the preachy mode.
Yeah,
You shouldn't.
I know. God,
Oh,
when anybody
I
preaches to me, it really makes me go eat.
despise that Shun now. I
Yeah.
really do. I'm like, she was so out of control. And you don't get anybody to convert,
But I do
by
love
the
this idea that because you're really making a difference right now, and it's really interesting to hear that you went and you failed and then you tried again, right? I mean, we all have to hear that every minute of the day because I'm still really failure adverse. So you
yeah,
went and you preached, and everyone was like, "Hard no, stay away from me." I always
yeah,
love this. I love this phrase. An addict always protects their substance. Not to say everybody was addicted, but
yeah,
nevertheless, I once had probably I don't know, 5 months of therapy with somebody who was really just unwilling to give up whole wheat bread, even though she couldn't stop eating it. You know,
yeah, yeah,
we protect
yeah,
it. We protect it. So what ended
yeah.
up working and what happened and what are we
So,
doing now?
so I'll just like to say I use my immediate family as sort of like the lab, the testing site, and it didn't work out. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it did for my husband and myself, but I'll say now after year three, now my mom's making the connection.
Wow.
Because I think she can just see, and I'm a better daughter now.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
a, I'm a better mom now. My kids tell me my husband. I don't like to brag, but yeah, he's a happy guy.
Yeah.
So, but so when I thought about like what can I do to make sure that people are aware, I was just like sort of use this storytelling setting
Yeah.
and connect women of color together so that we can just have a space that's safe and protected,
Mm.
and we can just mesh the world of health, mesh the world of history, and do it all in sisterhood. That's
Wow.
all. That's all. I mean, and I will say that I'm learning, because the whole thing about the best teachers to me are the teachers who are listening, or the teachers who are changing things up and saying, you know what, I put that poll out there, but they did not respond at all.
Yeah, evolve or die. That's mine. If there's a better idea, you got to get on it. If you have any influence with other people, you can't stick to old ideas if they're not working. That's for sure.
So I love it. I
What's
really
the
do.
community called, Shun? I love
It's
this.
called Sisters Breaking the Bonds of Sugar.
Yes, it sure
So
is. What are
yeah,
you guys doing? Tell us
yeah,
about it.
we're I'm taking them on the same journey I've been on. Listen, if you find an article out there about how sugar is impacting this community in the Latino community, what is, soda's doing in that community, how does obesity look in that community, how
Mhm.
does it look for African American? What about the history of slavery and sugar for African American? How about when we look across the globe and we're saying that, people of color are still doing the work of sugar farming? So just making those connections.
Right.
Some,
Leading
some
them to the water, as we say.
for me, that was what helped me. I'm not sure if you could just have come off the street for me and just say, sugar's not bad. It's not good for you.
Well, the other
I
thing I think happens in the sugar community, and I think in the diet industry in general, is that, my favorite of all is like if somebody tells you that there's one way, run away. And I think when you're dealing with people who are culturally entrenched, and I mean, I've dealt with so many people, and it's like, it's not necessarily like give up everything and start eating organic and all of this. Like,
Mhm.
one thing leads to more things, leads to more things. And I think when you're meeting somebody who is resistant at best, probably because they're protecting, and to say,
Mhm.
okay, change your entire life. And that's the only way you can
Yeah.
do it. And if you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. I'd be like,
Right.
great. I'm just going to, like, I'll see you at the Dr. Pepper machine if you need me. And I
And,
think when we offer it in this way that you're offering it, and I think like the ideas in harm reduction, like something always being better than nothing, because then something leads to more, in my
that's
experience.
that's so true. And I really just am trying to use the 21-day challenge to pull people in because a lot of people like that. They love to hear 21-day challenge. But anyone who knows anything about sugar and or addiction
Yeah.
of any sort knows that it's not like a 21 days.
No, but
It
it's a communing, right? Because yes,
right,
you have to have a
right,
relationship with food no matter what. So
right.
I think
Yeah.
it's amazing actually how delusional we can get when someone says 30 days off and you're like, that, great, then I'm done. And I'm like, there's literally like no reason to that. Like you're done,
Yeah.
but you still have to have breakfast the next morning. You just get to go back to donuts. Like, can we turn on our brains here? Like, but
Right.
I'm with you. Like breaking up with sugar, like, is the best decision I ever made.
Mhm.
Everything about my life is better. There's
Yeah.
very few moments where I'm sitting there like, oh, this stinks. And the only time it usually stinks is when I'm around a bunch of sugar and everybody's kind of eating it with reckless abandon and it's not my
Yeah.
food. That's what I always
Yeah.
say. Not my food.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just start with like basic the awareness of, basic the difference between high fructose and table sugar.
Right.
People should know that.
Just
Like
start
I should
somewhere.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to start with those basic conversations and then also checking in with people. I think people really need community right now.
I mean,
You
right
know,
now, I think they need it no matter what. I really don't
yeah,
think that there's any way we do this without each other.
yeah,
And I think
you're right.
there's this belief in the world that we should do it alone and figure it out ourselves. And we're not made that way. We're made to
Yeah,
be in community. That's,
yeah.
I think, the strongest, that's, I think, what the most beautiful part of what you're doing here. And you're not bragging enough, Shun, because the community you've made has like grown exponentially in like 4.5 seconds. Can you just brag for a minute? I thought
I,
I might have. Come on.
you know what? I'm just gonna say this for the women who are involved and engaged right now. I am so happy that they're going to experience some different type of freedom
Yeah,
that they don't know about. Like some of them really don't know. And like that's what I want to share. It's like y'all think
absolutely.
I'm just like joking with this happy thing. No, I'm happy, like I'm really happy.
No, you really are. You really are.
Yeah.
You're happy, you're
So,
faithful.
yeah.
You're like my squad goal. Yeah, and I think listen, I also think there's so many lessons in your story for me, but I think the other one is like you really listened to that tap.
Mm,
I'll brag for you.
okay.
She's like, I really wanted to get like 6 people into this group and I have 80. That's
Yeah.
like I'm not a numbers person, but that's something. And I have like I got a vibe on this group. I can tell you something. You are literally starting a movement. And I think it's incredible because I think there's such an overlooked need and I think the way that you're doing it is, with love, with experience, with flexibility, with forgiveness. Like,
Mhm.
I'm just like so psyched to see what happens here. Like, this is like for the listener, like this is an up and coming story. Stay watching. Sean, tell us about where we can find you. Tell us about if somebody's listening and they want to join your Facebook group. Can you tell us what it's called? And then tell us your, like, where do we, like, if I want to know you more,
Yes.
I'll text you after this. But if I'm
Yes.
listening and I want to know you more, how do I
If you
find you?
if you're interested in the group, then you can reach me at sugarfreesisters at gmail.com.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's a great
Um,
name. That's great.
yes. And
What's your Instagram? Where can we find you there?
so Instagram, I'm at Sugar Mode Off.
Sugar mode off.
Yeah. Twitter, I'm at Sugar Mode Off.
There you go. Everywhere.
And actually, my Gmail is sugarmodeoff at gmail.com.
And there we
I mean,
have it.
yeah.
And there we have it.
So
Listen,
I'm,
I love to hang with people that are changing the world. And I can honestly say, my friend, you are one of them. And I'm so grateful to know you.
oh,
I'm so grateful you'd come and hang out with me for a little bit. Well, we hang out a lot, let's be honest.
yeah,
But
yeah.
and I'm just so glad to have you. And thank you. Anything
Thank
you want
you.
to say? Anything you need us to know before we leave?
Um, you know, I think first of all that the work that you're doing is incredible
Thank you.
because I don't, I don't think we understand like when we're weak and we're not willing and we're not wanting that, and we're wanting to stay like in a comfortable zone, how it truly is impacting the lives of others.
Yeah.
So,
True change happens from within.
yeah, and I know that you're being stretched and pulled and pushed in different directions, but at the same time, like that energy is what draws me and inspires me and empowers me to say, you know what, I can do something too. And so,
Well, this is the spirit of community. Because what I want to say, and we'll stop here, is samesies. Like you too. Like you and I, like you're like, well, I'm in the hospital here and I can talk here and I can work. And me too. And it's all in the service of like getting well and creating a healthy community. And like, namaste. Love you.
my stuff. Yeah. Thank you. Love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.